The first speaker today is Nina Day, the Policy Advisor for the Health and Safety Executive specialising in road transport, who will talk about load security. Nina has worked for the Health and Safety Executive for 20 years. In the HSE Science Division, she carried out fatal and serious injury incident investigation, also consultancy, and leads a team looking at various aspects of transport safety, including safe loading. The second speaker is Steve Lyon from the DVSA, which I must admit I had to Google last night, the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency based at Liverpool. He's worked for the DVSA for 22 years now and manages a team of 10 vehicle examiners who carry out enforcement activities, including roadside, MOT, station visits, and HGV, public service vehicle operator visits. Then lastly, we have Sergeant Rob Simpson, turn the page, the boss from the Cheshire Rural Crime Team that was established in 2019. The team are working hard to improve the rural farming community's confidence in policing. We're also joined on the call by Thomas Price, who is the NFU Farm Safety and Transport Advisor. And also, can I take this opportunity to thank Lisa Scott, as I'll forget at the end. She's the Regional Road Safety Coordinator for Highways England, who has instigated this event and hopes to replicate it across the region. Highways England Driving for Better Business programme provides free resources to improve safety and risk management, and the website and contact details will be sent out after the session. Thank you very much. That's me finished. So first up, we have Nina Day. You there, Nina?
I will see if I can share my slides.
Okay, brilliant.
I don't know if you have to give me control of that, but I might be okay. Okay, can you see my slides?
Perfect, thank you, Nina.
Excellent, yeah. It's always a good start. Right, hello, it is genuinely a pleasure to be talking to you today. Obviously, vehicle loading and load securing is an area that I've been interested in and have been working in for quite a long time now, about 15 years, and it is a topic that's quite close to my heart. Unfortunately, in working in HSE, I've dealt with a lot of fatal and serious injury incidents over the years, and none of us are robots. It is very difficult not to feel some emotion when you're dealing with families who have been bereaved in terrible circumstances, with people who have seen their colleagues killed or seriously injured at work. And in transport, I think some of these incidents are made even worse by the fact that very often they are very easily preventable. So what I want to do today, rather than giving you slides full of all the legislation and all the rest of it, what I want to do is talk through some real incidents and also talk about the things that are going wrong again and again. And they're quite simple things, actually. That they're not really difficult things to solve and to deal with, and just try and give you some advice about some of the simple steps that you can take that will quite significantly reduce your chances of being involved in an incident. Because none of us want that. It's in none of our interests to have these things going wrong. Even if nobody gets injured, if you lose the load on a vehicle, it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you time. It's going to be an inconvenience for you. None of us want to be in that situation. So today is going to be very much about practical advice based on my experience. If there's anything that comes up that you want to ask a question about, we'll go to questions at the end. So load security is very often, in my experience, something that goes under the radar a little bit. So it's something that people don't always think about, because transport is just something that happens. We need to get to a place to do some work, so we load things into our vehicle, and we don't necessarily think about the actual transport. And as you can tell, I'm including myself in that as well. We all do it. If we don't get transport right, it can cause a lot of problems. So you get things flying off vehicles, load debris, and it might hit other road users, other vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, etc. If a vehicle's moving around in a trailer, even if it doesn't come off, it can affect the vehicle handling. And it might, for example, lead to rollover, whereas you wouldn't get it normally. You also have what are called secondary collisions. That's where the debris comes off the vehicle, doesn't hit anything, it's just lying in the road. But then, of course, other drivers might slam their brakes on, or they're swerving to avoid it, and they end up hitting a tree, or they hit another vehicle, and that's the secondary collision. Even if you get to your destination and the load is still on the vehicle, it might have become unstable. It might have moved so much it's unstable, and when you start unloading it, it falls out and it hits you. That is a really common type of incident that we see in HSE. The load has made the journey, but then at the point of unloading, the straps are taken off, the load has become unstable, and it falls out, and it either hits somebody, or they jump out of the way to try and avoid it, trip over something, which is easily done, and they fall and they break their arms, they break their collarbones, they hit their head on something. We get a steady stream of these coming into HSE. So not getting it right, it does cost us all. It has this huge knock-on effect, and most of these load shifts are preventable, and they are quite easily preventable. I just want to show you a recent example. This is something that I worked with Devon and Cornwall Police on. It was a really, really sad incident. No one involved intended it for this to go this way, for this to happen. A farmhand was driving JCB with some straw bales on a trailer, and he didn't strap them down. It was only a short journey. He was only going at low speed, and he didn't strap them down. As he pulled onto the road, he braked because a cyclist was coming, and one of the bales came tumbling off the trailer, hit the cyclist, who was known to him. They were neighbours. It's a small, close-knit community. And unfortunately, that cyclist ended up with horrendous head injuries. He was in an induced coma for some time. He's got lasting disabilities, lasting medical problems, and it's just been devastating to everyone. To the farm worker, obviously to the cyclist and his family, and it was something that didn't need to happen at all. And he knew himself that he should have strapped it down. And I think it's quite understandable why he didn't. He thought it was just a short journey. It's a quiet country road, very few people there. He didn't think it was a problem. And it was a journey he'd done many times before without having problems. And this is one of the big issues with load security and load shifts, that you can get away with it, if you like, for quite a long time without something going wrong. But you just need that one day where everything goes wrong at the same time. And then you're in a situation like this, and you've got a worker who now has to live the rest of his life knowing that he injured somebody so badly, a friend and neighbour, has suffered these terrible injuries. Nobody wants to be in that situation. So even those short journeys, you can't say, oh, I'm only going down the road. It's not a problem. I'm only going at 10, 15 miles an hour. It's not a problem. It doesn't matter. A lot of the really serious load shifts actually happen at less than 30 miles an hour. It's all about thinking, what is the risk if this comes off? It doesn't matter how long your journey is. And with risk, the fact that you've done it for a long time doesn't mean that it's safe. Your risk is resetting itself every single day. So your risk today is the same as it was yesterday. It's the same as it will be tomorrow, next week, next year, unless you do something to bring it down. It won't change just because of time. This is another incident, and it's not agricultural related, but I just wanted to talk about this one because it illustrates the fact that it's not just the big loads that are a problem. This happened down in Surrey 5 years ago now, 4.5, 5 years ago now. And it was a small bit of kit. It weighed 66 kilograms. It was in the back of a little drop-sided transit, and the driver hadn't strapped it down or covered it with anything. As he was driving through a village, it's not often you get a picture of a load actually moving, but as he went over a level crossing, you can see that bit of equipment actually lifted up off the bed so far that it cleared the drop sides. And by the time it came back down again, the transit had gone. It was down the road. But the bit of equipment was still connected to the transit by one of its airlines. So it was now swinging around like a pendulum behind the vehicle. And it struck two pedestrians, Emma and Rob Beanie, who were walking their dog on the pavement. And Emma was killed at the scene and Rob suffered horrendous head injuries. Again, it didn't need to happen. And the driver knew very well what he should have done, because his first action after he stopped the transit was to get a ratchet strap from the cab and drape it across the back of the bed in two halves to try and make it look as if the strap had failed. So he knew what he should have done. And it's one of those really tragic incidents that did not need to happen. Over the last 20 years, in all of the incidents that I've worked on, and it's probably over 200 by now, you see the same pattern again and again and again. You start off with something that in itself is probably quite minor. You wouldn't even think that it's a problem. And you can go into quite a long stage, and this can go on for decades, where it doesn't really cause a problem. I call it an anticipation phase. I say this can go on for 20, 30 years, and there's no serious issue there, but that underneath it all, there's something fundamentally wrong. You might come to a point, a turning point, and it's that one day where the stars align badly, where everything goes wrong at the same time. Usually it's something that you didn't expect happening. So it might be that you get a delivery, something's gone wrong during the journey, the load's moved, and now there's a bit of a panic going. The driver's, running around saying, I can't unload that. It's moved so much I can't unload it. If you haven't anticipated that, if you don't have a plan for what you might do, it tips you straight into what I call the imminent stage. This is much, much quicker. This could be minutes, hours, at most a couple of days. This is when things are really spiralling towards the big disaster and someone being killed. You see this pattern across all industries, doesn't matter what it is, the same thing happens every time. Once you're in that last phase, it's really difficult to say, whoa, stop. Let's step back and have a think about this and make sure we're doing it the right way. That's when people get killed. I've seen this so many times over the years, and it's tragic because you can look back and you can see what was happening. But at the time, in the moment, people didn't realise it. The best way to manage it, to make sure you never get to the disaster, is to get in early, to get in that orange stage, the anticipation bit, before things are going wrong very quickly, and just ask yourself, have we made sure that things can't get to that point? Have we got a plan for this? Have we made sure that our vehicles are loaded properly, that things are tied down, that we know what to do if the load moves during the journey? It's much easier to do it at that point than trying to fix it when it's already gone wrong. I also went back a couple of years ago and put together a short list of why people get killed in load shifts. And it is a short list. This is it. Now, I know, having worked for HSE for 20 years, whenever I say the words risk assessment, everybody does the risk assessment face and, oh no, which means lots of paperwork. And I don't at all. You can do a good risk assessment on the back of an envelope. It doesn't have to be this hugely bureaucratic thing. It's just about thinking about what you're doing, what could kill you, and what you're going to do to stop that happening. And that's it. That's an adequate risk assessment. Again and again with the fatalities, what you see is that there is no risk assessment, or it hasn't been thought through at all. It will be a risk assessment for transport that just says drive safely, for example. If you don't get the risk assessment right, you'll never get anything else right. If you think properly about the actual risks of what you're doing, everything else falls into place really quickly. So you'll have the right equipment for the loads you're carrying. You'll make sure that your securing equipment is in decent condition. Doesn't have to be perfect, but if you've got straps with holes in them and you've had them for 20 years, it's probably time to get some new ones. Making sure that loads are stable when they go onto your trailer. Because if loads are not stable, you will never make them safe just with lashings. At some point, you're going to have to take the lashings off And if the load's unstable, it will fall. Poor communication is where people aren't telling other people what's happened in the past. And there have been quite a few incidents where drivers haven't known that something has gone wrong earlier, or the people unloading don't know that something's gone wrong during the journey, and they weren't prepared for it. You know, if someone's taking a load for you, you need to tell them what it is, how it's been loaded, and how it needs to be tied down. It's making sure people know what they're dealing with. Don't just assume that everybody knows what they're doing, because the reality is people make different assumptions about things. In terms of how we secure loads, it's actually quite straightforward when you break it down. Where people tend to make mistakes is they go straight to lashings, and that's just making your life more difficult than it needs to be. The best place to start is by using your vehicle or trailer structure as much as you can. So pushing the load up to the headboard, you know, if you've got drop sides, if you've got stanchions at the side, if you've got chocks or cradles or anything you can pack out your load with, use that. It will make your life a lot easier. When you've done all of that, that's when you go to the lashings. So webbing straps, chains, nets, tarpaulins, whatever. All of those things together, that's called the load securing system. If you do it that way round, it makes your life much easier, and it makes it much more likely that your load is compliant with the law. Whatever system you use, it's got to be capable as an absolute minimum of restraining a force equivalent to the entire weight of the load forward and half the weight of the load to the sides and the rear. That is for any load on any vehicle going on the public road. That is an absolute minimum. So when you're putting your system together, that's what you need to have in mind. So just go, you know, that idea of the system, can I use the headboard? Because if you load up to the headboard, straight away, you've restrained half the weight of the load. If you load more than 30 centimetres back from the headboard, you can't use the headboard as part of your system. So always try and go up against the headboard, or if you have to leave a gap, put something in it. It doesn't have to be high tech. You can put empty pallets in there, you can put timbers in there, but it's all about making sure you've got no gap bigger than about 30 centimetres. There are certain places where loads will always tend to shift, and roundabouts, long corners, long fast corners, slip roads, under braking usually at low speed, and accelerating from traffic lights, particularly accelerating uphill. Anywhere where you're changing speed and direction at the same time, that is your perfect storm for load shifts. This is why roundabouts are absolutely deadly when it comes to load movement. This is a nice example of what can happen setting off from traffic lights uphill. This happened in Bradford in 2018, and it was 18 tonnes of raw chicken breast. And it just had the tension bars in the back and they hadn't been fitted properly. So the driver set off uphill and the chicken came straight out of the back doors. Nobody injured or killed, but the road was shut for 26 hours while that was cleaned up in the middle of the heat wave, which probably wasn't good for anybody in the local area. I mentioned the headboard earlier, and this is really, really important in terms of load security and particularly protecting the driver, because the headboard is their last line of defence against that load moving forward. So it's got to be in decent condition. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just watch out for the welds between the headboard and the chassis. They will get damaged, they will crack, they will fail, the headboard will start to lean forward. And that happens if you've got an unsecured load behind it and it keeps sliding forward and hitting the headboard. Over time, it will just destroy that headboard. And eventually you'll get to the point where it can't stop the load coming forward again. So that's an example I saw a few weeks ago. I was out with Derbyshire Police on the M1 and we pulled in, the trailer had fencing on it and it'd been coming, you could see it had been coming over quite a long period of time, many journeys. And it was just cracking the welds between the headboard and the chassis. The whole headboard was leaning forward. They'd had a go at repairing it and the repair was cracking. So it is worth looking at the headboards on your vehicles and just making sure that if you see damage like this, get it repaired, because that headboard is protecting you, protecting anybody who drives your vehicles from that load moving forward. Frictional lashing, where the lashing goes up and over the top of the load, that works for most types of load, most types of vehicle. You don't need to put straps at bizarre angles to make sure it doesn't move. Frictional lashing works by pushing the load down onto the load bed. So you just need to go up and over the top, as close to vertical as you can get them. If you've got something that's really low to the load bed, it won't work very well. So it might be worth, say, stacking some empty pallets on top, just to try and get the height of the load up and increase the angle of the straps. As long as you've got a good pull down from those straps, that load is going nowhere, and that is nice and secure. If you've got heavy equipment like a tractor or other plant equipment, the best way to secure that is with direct lashing. So one end of the lashing onto your equipment, the other end onto the trailer. You need a minimum of 4 lashings. They're all pulling in opposing directions, as close to horizontal as you can get them, and it will effectively pin your equipment in place. It is going nowhere. Any kind of boom arm, loose buckets, any other loose equipment you've got on the back, just throw a strap over the top through frictional lashing, and that won't move either. If you've got chains that you're not using, they've got to be away somewhere, preferably with a lid. Don't just leave them loose on the bed. Very often that's what catches people out. The equipment itself is tied down really well, but then there are loose chains on the bed. If they come off the side, particularly if they get caught up in the wheels, they can go out, flick out into oncoming traffic. And I've had a fatal incident like that where another driver got decapitated, a chain from somebody else's lorry. Webbing straps cause a lot of confusion, and I just want to talk about this really quickly because this is a problem I see a lot. The big number on a strap label, that LC number, is totally irrelevant to frictional lashing, where the strap goes over the top of the load. So that is not a 2-ton strap when it comes to putting over your load in frictional lashing. The number you want is that smaller number, the STF, which is much lower. You would only use the lashing capacity for the direct lashing of your heavy equipment. It is quite a complicated process working it out. There are ways to make it easier how many straps you need. There are ready reckoners. The strap manufacturers have apps that you can download onto your phone. They also produce, it's like cardboard slide rules that you can use. You know, you only need to do, if you're moving the same things all the time, you only need to do that once, just check that you've got enough straps. One of the most common reasons for people to get tickets and PG9s is because they're not using enough straps. Because they think, oh, I've got a 10-ton load, I'll use 5 2-ton straps, job done. And it's not enough. Also, you've got to make sure that your webbing straps are in reasonable condition. Again, they don't need to be perfect, but straps are incredibly vulnerable to damage. They can be damaged by the weather. Even sunlight or rain, if they're out in the open, they will get damaged over time. They will get weaker. If you write on them with pen, if they're going over sharp edges, all of that will damage it over time. A strap that is rated when it's new, with lashing capacity might be 5 tons, after a few years, when it's been on an open vehicle, it will probably fail at less than a ton. I've tested a lot of straps from fatal incidents, and not one of them has failed at more than 2 tons in a test machine, when it's been 5 tons originally. So just keep an eye on your straps. You don't need any kind of technical knowledge to see the damage in them. If you can see daylight through the strap, if you can stick your finger through a hole in them, it's time to throw that out and get some new straps. There's no set discard period for them. You don't have to get them checked on a set schedule like you would lifting equipment. But there is legislation, PURE, the Provision and Use of Work Equipment Regulations, that says they have to be fit for purpose. So it's good practice to at least just have a visual check of them every 6 months or so. Have a look at them before you use them and just check you haven't got holes in them, that they aren't pulling themselves apart, and make sure that you've got some new ones on hand if you need them. Straps that you're using for load security shouldn't be used for lifting, and vice versa. It's one or the other. It's very different forces, and you can damage them quite easily if you use them for something they're not designed to do. If you've got loose items, I mentioned the chains, but there are all kinds of other loose items you might have on a trailer bed, you know, shovels, crowbars, whatever. All of those things need to be covered or put in something that's got a lid. It's very, and I see this a lot. I was out yesterday with the police and I saw this several times. You know, people will just throw things in the back and, oh, well, you know, it won't move. Why would it come off? Things do, inevitably. Roads have potholes. You go over bumps, you go up onto the pavement and back down onto the road. Things will lift up off the load bed. And even quite a small item flying off, if it hits a pedestrian, that could still do them some serious damage. So it's really important to make sure that those small items are put away or they're covered with something. It might just be you throw a tarpaulin over the top. That's, you know, job done. You've covered the bed. So, you know, particularly in the small open vehicles, small trailers, just throw a tarpaulin over it. Rather than trying to secure every single item, just put a net or a tarpaulin over the top, and that's it. A couple of minutes, everything's covered, nothing's going to bounce out, and your load's secure. I did say I was going to talk about legislation. I'm going to touch on it very, very briefly because this is one of the other things where people
Sorry
do.
to interrupt, Nina, but can you make sure it is brief, please?
Sorry?
Sorry to interrupt, but can you make sure it is briefly, please?
It's extremely brief, don't worry.
Yes,
I'm about 2 slides off again. Yeah, it is really, really important to think about your responsibilities. And I've noticed it, you know, with agricultural vehicles, the farm side of things will be great, you know, and the systems will be there, the risk assessments will be there, the equipment, the training's there. And then we look at the transport and it's not quite as good. So just make sure you've got your paperwork there. Have you thought about it? Have you got your risk assessments? Have you got your training? Make sure you're looking not just your own employees, other people as well. You know, Section 3 is quite a broad duty. So just make sure you've got the transport side of things nailed down. There is other I'm not going to read that out, but there is other legislation as well. You're probably familiar with this already because you've dealt with it in other areas. Just be aware this does also apply to transport. You need to make sure that you've thought about these things. It does catch people out. And you don't want to find out that you haven't got these things when you've had an incident. Okay, things do very rarely go wrong in isolation. So if you've got a good management system, you know, and I know in agriculture, a lot of people have really, really good health and safety systems on the farm side of things. Just make sure that's in place for the transport too. You know, there's some great examples out there through the haulage industry generally, things like working at height, manual handling. People have put the thought into it. They've got really good kit to deal with those problems and they've just designed out the risk completely. And it's great to see. So, you know, there's plenty of advice out there. HSE provides free advice, so do DVSA, Highways England, other bodies. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. If you want to contact me directly about anything, you can drop me a line. I know that NFU have my email address, so do feel free to get in touch. I am always happy to answer a question. Has anybody got any questions?
I'm not seeing any at the moment, Nina. I know am I off mute? Yeah. I know I wrote down a couple as you were doing your comprehensive presentation, but then you cleared them off later on during that presentation. So it was very good. Is there any questions out there, please? Doesn't look like it. Have we got anything on the chat bar, Carl?
Richard, there was one on the chat bar, yeah, that was asking Nina, what are the behavioural aspects of decision making in these incidents? Obviously, as an organisation, you interview drivers involved in the accidents, and you've already mentioned in your presentation a lot of the causative factors. Is there any common theme to the poor decision making? For example, lack of time, rushing jobs, that sort of thing.
I think the lack of time and the rushing, that is quite a common one. And there's an element of just chancing it. You know, oh, I'm only going down the road. Oh, I've done this before and it's not been a problem. But also, and I can completely understand this, if you've been doing the job for a long time, if you've been doing that job for 20, 30 years and you've never had a serious issue, then it's very easy to think, well, it's not a problem. So from a behavioural point of view, I think there is an element of that. Well, what are the chances that something's going to go wrong? And 99 times out of 100, nothing will go wrong. You know, and you'll get to your destination and there won't be a problem. But it just takes that one day where everything lines up, everything goes wrong at the same time, and then you're in this awful position where somebody's dead or they're seriously injured, and you realise that it's your fault. And I've spoken to people in that situation and bereaved families, and it's just an awful situation for everybody.
I've just got a quick one, if that's okay, Nina. You put the picture up, didn't you, of the van, which obviously had got the sides on, hadn't it? The pickup, but obviously there was stuff that could move around. A lot of people might think, well, okay, I've got the sides will catch anything because they're high enough. I'm thinking, say, a fencing trailer with posts or something like that in it.
Yeah. That it is really common for people to think that, but the trouble is that things do bounce up, and it's when you're standing next to it, when the vehicle stops, it's really hard to imagine it happening. And I think that one, the Etchingham one, with that little bit of equipment that bounced up, it's the first time you've got pictorial proof of that happening. I actually show that to drivers now when I'm talking to them, because they say, well, it can't bounce over the side. Well, they do. You'd be amazed how much these loads do move, and how they will clear the sides if you don't tie them down. But it is difficult to imagine it when you're standing next to the vehicle when it's not moving. And I completely understand that, because I would probably think the same thing 15 years ago. But you have to think you're not driving on a perfectly smooth, level road. Once you're driving along at 40 miles an hour and you're going over potholes, other bumps in the road, level crossings, the load in the back is going to be bouncing up and down, and it can go quite a long way. You can do this in a car. You put something on your back seat or the passenger seat, don't secure it in any way, even if it's a box, and just see how much that moves around when you're driving down the road. Throw your mobile phone on the passenger seat and see how much that moves around when you're driving.
Okay, thank you for that, Nina. We've got Carl Hudspeth with another question. I assume that's Chris's question, is it?
It is indeed, Richard. Yeah, Chris asks, what is the restriction on overhanging loads on truck and flat bed trailers, please, Nina?
The overhang aspect of it is probably more DVSA, to be honest. From a load security perspective, it's not necessarily a problem lengthways as long as you've done something about it. So the classic one is things like timber and poles and things like that, where they're overhanging the back of the bed and the tailboard's been dropped. Because you haven't got that barrier at the back, you need to make sure that things can't slide out backwards. So it might be that you get some webbing straps and loop them round your load. So in a choke lashing, a loop lashing, so that the load can't come backwards. Or you could wrap a tarpaulin round the back of the load like a big sail that will give you a bulkhead effectively at the back of your trailer to stop the load coming out.
Okay, thank you, Nina. We've just got Phil Baker with his hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. Do you get many issues of bridge strikes? Did you get that?
Sorry, I lost you there.
I said, do you get many issues of bridge strikes?
Did you hear that, Nina, or not? Do you get many issues with bridge strikes?
I haven't seen that many with agricultural vehicles. I have with things like car transporters, but not generally speaking with agricultural vehicles.
Okay, just thinking of local areas, low canal bridges and things like that. So.
No, they wouldn't generally come into HSE. It would be normally the police and DVSA who would deal with those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Nina. Hopefully you'll be able to join us at the end with questions once all three presentations have been completed. Can we move on now to
temporarily, I'm afraid, so.
What was that, sorry?
I'm afraid I will have to leave temporarily, but I will come back towards the end.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can we move on to Steve Lyon, please, now, the DVSA Vehicle Enforcement Manager? Thank you, Steve.
Afternoon. First of all, I've got to apologise because Openreach have decided to come and fix my phone line today of all days. So if you hear a bit of banging in the background, unfortunately, that's what it is. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. As the introduction said, I'm Steve Lyon, I'm Vehicle Enforcement Manager based up in Liverpool. From Liverpool, we cover Cheshire and Merseyside and parts of Greater Manchester. So obviously that's why I've been invited today. As the introduction said, I manage a team of 10 vehicle examiners who do enforcement work. As well as enforcement work, though, they do get involved in accident work and the accident investigation work with the police. Just to mention something, I know one of your colleagues asked earlier on about bridge strikes. I would say we do get called to a majority of bridge strikes, and no, it's not from an agricultural perspective. It's usually, as Nina said, it's usually a load on a HGV or double-decker buses, which is usually the major one. But we don't get a lot of bridge strikes from your part of the industry. As today, what I'll be talking about is preventive maintenance and some other things that have come up recently regarding tyres and walk-round checks of vehicles and that. So as it says, the preventive maintenance, carry out inspection and maintenance at regular intervals following manufacturer's guidelines, record any repair work. Remember, the vehicle trailers and implements is subject to the relevant legislation. Within the maintenance regime, obviously, some of you may have operator licenses and are fully aware of the PMI, the preventive maintenance intervals. But obviously, you've got other vehicles which fall outside them scopes. With them vehicles, it is best practice to be inspecting them on a regular basis. Obviously, there could be seasonal type of work where they're parked up for long periods of times and such like. So always at least do a first use inspection. If you buy a new piece of equipment, buy a new trailer or anything like that, again, do a first use inspection before you take responsibility for that vehicle or that trailer and take it on the road. We have had incidents where people have bought them from reputable dealers. They've taken them on the road, stopped by us within a week of it, and we've had a list of defects on it. Just because you bought the vehicle from a reputable dealer and you've had an inspection sheet saying it was inspected, make sure you're happy with that before you take it on the road. As Nina touched on before as well, the provision of use of work equipment regulation requires you to maintain any working equipment you provide. Most equipment should be regularly examined and tested by a competent person. That also goes for the examination of your vehicles. When we're looking at safety inspections of any trailers or vehicles, we do not stipulate a qualification that you have to have, i.e. like City and Guilds or BTEC. What we're saying is that you have to have a knowledge of that equipment and have experience, because obviously some of you have been in this industry for a long time, have got experience of them vehicles, have got experience how to examine a vehicle, prepare a vehicle for MOT if it needs it. But all I'd say there with about preparing a vehicle for MOT is people have got to remember that people have an idea that the MOT standard for a vehicle is like the gold standard. It's not. It is a standard that we expect the vehicle to pass on. If I go back to the haulage side of it, the traffic commissioner says that over a period, your vehicle should never go below the MOT standard. So it should be at a higher standard, and between safety inspections, if it does deteriorate to any standard, that standard should never be below the MOT standard, so that you should be able to present a vehicle at any time of the year for MOT and pass it. Unfortunately, a lot of people, especially saying the smaller vehicles, light goods and cars, have this perception that an MOT means that the vehicle is fit for the road for 12 months without it being looked at. All it says that on a day it met a certain standard. So some common issues, let's say we're obviously go back to our agricultural type of vehicles, towing eyes and hooks. Obviously, just remember that minimum clearance of 10 millimeters at the tip of the hook. where on the eye, the thickness of towing hitch must not be less than 30 millimeters. So obviously, an example here, and that's where we're on about the 10 millimeter gap to be checking to make sure that, you know, it's no greater than that. It's not the best picture in the world, but as you can see, the thickness between them two arrows there should not be any less than 30 centimeters. And if so, you look at replacing it. Again, suspension. This is quite, to say, severe fracture in a leaf suspension there, and it's also got one of the U-bolts or holding down bolts missing. But what you've got to remember is that when you're carrying out inspection of vehicles, before we get to that point, there is telltale signs like rust, some little rust marks or a little bit of movement that can highlight that you may have an issue. We've got to remember, obviously with road springs, is that any fracture will weaken the spring and weaken its performance. So be mindful of the type of terrain you're taking that vehicle on, because obviously if you're taking it on and off fields or rutted areas, you know, that suspension is going to take a lot more hammering than on a normal use. So things like holding down bolts should be checked regular, and the condition of that spring itself. As you can see on this one, this again is a couple of holding down bolts, but if you have a look at this first, at the front one here, which I'm going to highlight, you can see little gaps and little movements. Obviously, this is on a wet day, and you can just see the movement. But should we say, if you look at this vehicle on a dry day, what you could see maybe signs of rust, slight signs of movement. And then first signs of movement, you should be looking at, okay, do we need to secure the bolt? Has the spring snapped? If it is the spring, if it is the bolt needs securing, is it a case of tightening it up, or is it a case that it's been stretched and now I've got to look at replacing it? Because obviously with U-bolts and that, they can stretch. So just a case of, you know, tightening up. If you've had to tighten it up in the past on a couple of occasions, look at maybe, right, I'll replace it at this point. Because obviously once it starts stretching, every time you're looking at it, you could start having issues with loose U-bolts. And again, once you start having an issue with loose U-bolts, you can have issues with road springs, issues with axles moving and such like, and causing other damage on the vehicle. This again is an example of one of my colleagues found of where the actual spring eye bush was completely devoid of any material. Obviously, sometimes you'll find that these are rubber, like a compliance bush with a rubber seal, or some are nylon. Again, check for the conditions of them, check that, you know, that they are present. Once they start to deteriorate, and that they can deteriorate over, you know, quite a quick period of time. Also, again, if on trailers and such like that you're using in your businesses, they are hard-working trailers under some extreme conditions. So bear that in mind. As Nina mentioned before on her presentation, the introduction of moisture and dryness and freezing temperatures can assist in the deterioration of a bush very quickly. You know, you get a bit of water and it freezes, it defrosts, and all of a sudden you find that it opens up and it deteriorates. So I say keep an eye on these bushes. So as it says, what are the main points? Any brake or suspension or light or tyre defect may result in a prosecution, or it could lead to £100 on the spot fine and 3 penalty points for the driver. So I say this is what we want to avoid. We don't want to be, you know, we don't want to be issuing them, and I know my colleagues in the police don't want to be issuing them, but this is what it could lead to. I say it could lead to a prosecution. If you are the holder of an operator license as well, it would be informed. The traffic commissioner would be informed. So again, traffic commissioner could call you in and speak to you over your operator license. And what you got to think of is, if I have my operator license curtailed or suspended or even revoked, could I carry on doing part of my business? You know, so it can have a large knock-on effect. As it says, preventative maintenance. And some of the things we're looking at here, you know, you look at the handbrake ratchet. You know, it should never have got to this stage. If you look at the corrosion, you know, is it going to actually work? Will it be seized? You know, if it doesn't work, you've got the effects of maybe parking a trailer that could roll away. But also in that condition, as you start to ratchet, is the cable going to snap and actually injure the operator of the ratchet? So, you know, it should never get to that point. We are looking at preventative maintenance. This was an incident that one of my examiners was called out to in Cheshire. On the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see that the road surface is heavily scored and damaged. On the right-hand side, it's actually a wheel and a hub off a slurry trailer that got embedded into a fence and a garden. Luckily enough, it was only a fence and a garden, but you can imagine if that had come off and there'd been a car or a motorcycle or a push-cycle motorcycle coming the other way, or even pedestrians, you know, with horrific consequences. That's how the trailer ended up. I'm saying, you know, you're looking at hubs. How often are you stripping your hubs down? You know, are you keeping within the manufacturer's guidelines? If you're not, is it being packed up for a number of months, you know, and not turning? So obviously your bearing could seize or start to deteriorate. If it's that type of trailer, right, do we have to look at, you know, doing them biannually or something, stripping a hub down and regreasing it and packing it up? Because something like a bearing failing could have such a consequential impact on yourself and other road users, which, you know, at the end of the day, I don't want to be calling out my examiners. Lucky enough on that day, my examiner just turned out, issued paperwork regarding the wheel coming off. You know, if we were unlucky, we could have been out with the police assisting on a fatal accident, you know, which is what none of us want. Driver walk round check. I apologise that I've used a HGV schematic on this one, but it does what it needs. As the driver of a vehicle, you know, you're legally responsible for that vehicle before you do you take the vehicle out on the road. Any type of vehicle, you should do a walk around check to make sure you're happy with the condition of that vehicle, be it the lights, mirrors, the actual condition of the tires, condition of the wheel fixings. You know, we're not asking people to go underneath and do a safety inspection, but what we're saying is, you know, there are checks that you can do as a responsible driver to make sure that vehicle and that trailer that you're taking on the road is in a safe condition to do so. What we say to Hawley side as well, you know, obviously I know yourselves, you work all year round, all times of days. You know, if the vehicle's going out early in the morning, late at night, and you're taking it out, how do you check them wheel nuts? How does your driver check the wheel nuts and tyres? Has he got a torch? If he's not, give him a torch so we can have a look at it. Simple things like that. A simple torch, have a quick look at the tyre and the wheel rim before it goes out. You know, could saving taking a vehicle out with defective wheels or wheel studs. And again, if trails are stood for long periods of time off your site, you know, again, check to make sure no one's damaged or actually remove parts, you know, unbeknown to yourselves. The other thing that's come in recently, which I think a lot of you may have seen in the news, is the 10-year-old tyre rule. So from the 1st of February 2021, they came in under construction usage will not allow tyres aged 10 years or old to be used on a front steered axle of HGV buses or coaches and all single wheel fitments of minibuses, 96 seats. So if you use it, if you do use it and you do present a vehicle for annual test, which I do appreciate that not all your vehicles go for annual test, you know, it will fail annual test and a prohibition will be issued. The other thing we're saying, it's good practice on any vehicle not to be using a tyre over 10 years old. The consequence of this came to light after there was a fatal coach accident coming back from the Isle of Wight to Liverpool, where they found that the age of the tyre was contributory to the actual accident. There is a link there, which I'm not proposing to open up now, but obviously just bear in mind if you have horse boxes, I say if you transport as part of your business, the 10-year-old tyre rule will come into effect if you're presenting for annual test. But also if your vehicles are not presented for annual test, you know, bear that in mind. A 10-year-old tyre, you may think, yeah, it's not done much in mileage, but it could have been sat around. in direct sunlight, in adverse weather conditions and such like, and this will deteriorate the strength of the rubber and the actual structure of the tyre. This is an example of how you can tell how old the tyre is. On the left hand side there, you see it says 4907. The 49 part of the tyre information describes the week of the year that it was actually manufactured, and the 07 is the year of manufacture. So that was manufactured in year 49 in 2007.
Is that on agricultural tyres as well, Steve, please?
I'm not quite. I'll find that out for you, and I'll pass that back to you. But any
sorry to be blunt, but if you no,
that's for no. But obviously, you've got people who are using vehicles for horse boxes, hay transporters, and things like that. So that it will affect them as well.
Yeah.
And as we say, any tyre on 10-year-old, we would advise you to replace it. But I'll get you an answer back for that for the agricultural side. The actual picture on the left hand side is that tyre where we've got the information off. That was the condition of the tyre when it came into the check site. And that's it from me. Any questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Have we got any questions, or is there anything in the chat bar? Can I just ask then, Steve? Say, like you had the picture of the tanker with the wheel come off. Obviously, there's a bearing failed. Yeah, I've seen you, Victoria. I'll come next. Your wheels come off. There's been a bearing failed. You've done a walk round check. Obviously, you can't see bearings on a walk round check. Should we be writing down each day that we've done a walk round check, or?
Yeah, if you've done a walk around check, you say there's a lot of literature out there which you can purchase from TacoNet or Taco Disc and people like that, or even make your own up a little sheet and just say, yeah, I've had a walk around, I've checked the wheel nuts, I've checked the tyres, and just tick it off each day that you know that either yourself or your driver has done that, and then it kind of I wouldn't say it mitigates, but it gives some proof there to your walk round check. As you're saying there, with a bearing, that's more for your preventive maintenance, i.e. how long is it since we've had that hub down, what words the vehicle been in between, has it been parked up, for a lengthy period of time, and that. But yeah, with the walk round check, some type of booklet, even a diary.
Okay, thank you,
It
Steve.
doesn't have to be overly complicated.
Over to Victoria, please. You've got a question.
Yes, it's about what you were talking about, the tyres, because I actually have tipper wagons, and we've took one for MOT recently, and I think it's going to become an ongoing problem where we're going to get advisories because those tyre markings are obviously, the tyres are paired up, that the tyre markings are on the inside. Yep. So do you see what I mean? The markings are then, so the examiner can't see them then. So he's then marking them as an advisory.
Yep.
But I am a bit shocked in another way that the tyre manufacturers haven't sort of got themselves together and made sure that those markings are put on both sides of the tyres, so this wouldn't be an issue moving forward, because obviously this is going to be an ongoing issue for a lot of people who will now have advisories. Is there anything you can suggest, obviously, to reduce that?
The only thing we can suggest is that you basically have a good tyre management system, so that if you are pairing them up that way, and there's no way that you can put the markings on the outside, that you do have a note of when the tyre went on and when it was, the age of the tyre before you put it up. That's why on a non-steered axle we are only using an advice at the moment to basically advise the operator that we can't find an age for that tyre. Please be aware that it may be coming up to 10 years old and such like. It's, as I say, it's only legislation that was brought in from the 1st of February. You must refine that the tyre manufacturers moving forward will maybe looking at start dual marking tyres on either side.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because am I right in thinking though that some tyres, the tread determines which way anyway it's paired up, so that inevitably there will be some that where you can't. Are you saying then maybe if we kept a record of the tyres and took that to the test centre, may they recognise that?
No, you'd still even if you took it to the test centre and said this is the tyre we've put on and you can't see the readings, but we've got the detail, they would still advise you, because it is only an advisory, that when it came for test, we couldn't see we couldn't make a decision on the age of that tyre. And it's basically just bringing it to your attention. It's not a black mark against you as an operator. It's bringing it to your attention that,
no, it just doesn't look very good though, does it? It just doesn't look very good when you I suppose.
No, it's an advisory. It's same at roadside. If you stopped at roadside by one of my examiners, they would give you an advisory on that as well, Victoria.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Victoria. Over to Jane Gurney, please.
Hi everyone. Just a quickie to say that we've worked incredibly hard with the trailer manufacturer in the disappeared to put together daily checks. They're available absolutely free. No one makes any profit. You don't need to have anything special. But if you hit the Tilly Pass on your handset or on your Google search, you can download Bailey's, Richard Weston's, Stewart's, anyone's checks. You've got all your manuals on there if you've lost your manual. You've got your torque settings for taking your wheels on and off and so forth. And you've also got walk around videos on the Richard Weston to show you how to do a daily check on an agricultural trailer. Harry West's, all of those different muck spreads and so on. All the information in one place called Head to Toe, and you can access it for free. So I put the link up on the chat, but you can load it on your phone or just view it or you can print it off. So it's a great way of doing the manufacturer's recommended checks. You can also email them from the app and you can telephone them to ask them a question. So use the info.
Thank you very much, Jane.
Yeah, you can.
Richard, just about Jane up there though, most things we ask people to do, be it operator license wise and such, like, there are usually free alternatives. You know, I mentioned Techo this before. There are usually free alternatives if people Google them.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much, Steve, for your presentation. If we could move on now to Rob Simpson, please.
Hopefully, if this works, I should start to appear on your screen. My camera looks like it's coming online. Can you see me at all?
Yeah.
Marvellous. Okay. And so really speaking, I'm going to slightly present differently. I don't have a slideshow to give you. I'm going to talk to you about some of the things and some of the things that have come up and some of the concerns that's been raised when I've been speaking with the NFU and so on. So introduction, I'm Rob Simpson. I'm the sergeant that looks after the rural crime team here in Cheshire. We have 613 square miles of ruralness in this wonderful county, and I have 11 people on my team in which to really kind of get stuck into it. Now, if you average out what that square mileage is, I can't do the sums, but it's quite big. So we rely heavily on sort of the local policing units and other teams as well to support into some of the projects we're working on. So really speaking, I've been asked to come on today and talk about two aspects of things: the roads policing sort of stuff, which is relevant to the two previous speakers, and both fascinating kind of inputs from them, and certainly sort of highlights some of the dangers and some of the areas where our roads policing officers and even our unit are coming across some problems. And we'll talk about some of those as we move forward. And then the latter part, I'm just going to touch on some of the crime stuff, which relates to those vehicles that we'll be talking about anyway, and just give you an idea of what's happening at the moment and where we're sort of going forward and moving along with. So first of all, though, as well as thanking the two previous speakers for taking a lot of the heat out of some of the arguments that I'd have to push forward about the safety stuff, also want to sort of thank you good people on here as well that have been involved in sort of farming through the pandemic and ensuring that people like me still have food readily available and on the plate. So thank you very much, everyone. I really do appreciate it. I'm sure across the board everyone else does, although you may sometimes feel like people aren't saying that. But thank you very much. Okay, so on the road side of stuff, and it can be a real bone of contention. If you think about, we've been set up since 2019 and we're really, really keen to give sort of farming and rural communities a voice. And then what you're asking for is more police in the countryside, supporting you, preventing crimes, preventing people trespassing on your land and so on. But there's a caveat with having more police in the countryside, and that is we're more likely to come across some of the issues that we've been talking about previously, some of the road traffic offences and so on. And one of the things I'm quite keen to do is use some of the other supporting teams, and that does mean road policing as well. And I think we've had sort of fair warning really now with some of the inputs that have come up. You've heard about the reasons why it's so important. I've never spoken to anyone yet who doesn't really want safer rural roads. We all want that. We absolutely do. If there's anyone that doesn't want that, then they're quite clearly in the wrong meeting. And I imagine some of you on here may have had some run-ins with the police about some things. And I think when it was particularly low with Nina, I think she hit the nail on the head where she said, because we get used to the way of doing things, sometimes we've managed to do it for a period of time, and then we can't understand why suddenly we have a police officer saying, you just can't do that. That is wrong. That is dangerous. And that can cause that friction. And we've seen that recently as well. So I asked for a list from my roads and crime unit colleagues of the main sort of issues that they're seeing on our rural roads. And this is what they gave us. And I don't think any of them will come as a surprise. And I think, as the previous two speakers said, they're both previously said, they're all rather easy to avoid, as it were. So trailers with insecure loads was number one on the list. The lack of strapping to secure those loads as well. And we've obviously talked about why that can be dangerous. But in particular, they wanted to highlight trailers that were carrying stone, aggregates, and also crop as well. Particular crops that are in there that have that real risk of debris coming off the trailers because they've not got covers on, and they're ending up on the road, on the carriageway, and potential risk for other people using the roads. So that was one that they, and I certainly know that there's been a number of traffic defence reports been done in relation to that. Movement of mini diggers or other farm, like farm machinery, plant machinery around as well. We're finding that people are using the weight, or assuming the weight of that item will keep it as a friction on the load bed. So we're not seeing the strapping down that we've seen in the previous slides and so on. We are just seeing it's a short journey, just going around the corner, and it's that kind of people's acceptance of risk, what they feel is going to be safe for them to be able to get away with. The knock-on effect of mobile phones, we've just had we've tried to publicise the fact about this, that we were doing this big mobile phone campaign because we still can't get away from this. And this is right across the board. This isn't just the agriculture industry. This is right for everyone who's out there on the roads. We're still not getting that message through. And arguably, the feeling is that if you are in charge of like a HGV or you're in charge of a larger vehicle, you've got so much more weight behind it. And if you're distracted, just the impact of that could be so much more worse. And again, certainly the mobile phone thing, with the way technology has moved on now, with hands-free kits and all that sort of stuff, and built into some of the vehicles we use, there really shouldn't be any excuse now. No excuse for being on mobile phones. And it's about, I suppose, again, when we talk about some of the other offences as well, we've got to change that mindset. We've got to make some of them as unpopular and as, as like drink driving or drug driving. Using a mobile phone, that never, no one should be doing that at all, ever. Okay, so we then had the issue where they were highlighting to me about careless or dangerous driving, and that's always something that's quite down to interpretation sometimes, what people might consider their standards of their driving. And all we have to remember really is, would a reasonable person, so someone who may not know anything about driving agricultural machinery, if they were stood at the side of the road and saw some standard of driving, now that might be the way that a junction's navigated or whatever, would they stand there and be able to say, yeah, no, that was fair, that moved quite safely, it was a good speed, it was, the load was balanced, whatever? Or would they be there, would their interpretation be like, oh, that was a bit fast, that was a bit whatever? And again, that's where it goes back to. It goes back to this this person that we have to kind of all imagine being at the side of the road. If they were to witness that kind of driving, would they consider it to fall below the standard of what would be expected of a competent driver, really? And I think we could probably all in our own families think of who were the best drivers in our families and who are the worst, and kind of give us an idea of that sort of judgment. So from the traffic side of things, what we have seen, however, is a bit of friction. That's been caused because there's been this issuing of the traffic offence reports, the modern version of kind of tickets, the penalty notices, and they've been given out, and that's kind of got the backs up of a few people, and understandably, it's never nice to be told that something's not right about your vehicle or the way you're doing things. Now, you have to remember, though, like myself, some of these traffic officers have seen sadly the other end of what happens when it does go wrong. Certainly on the roads policing side of stuff, you think about what they're going to almost on a weekly basis and seeing the end results. You can kind of well, I can certainly understand why they are so strong on enforcing some of these things. And when I look back at my policing career, which I know I look incredibly young, and you're all probably thinking how young I am, but the fact of the matter is, I have in the past been kind of guilty of giving people, warnings about vehicles or something like that, using that discretion. I often think to myself, how many of those people have taken that discretion and actually done anything with it? And that kind of sits heavy with you sometimes, where you think, well, I've advised someone about this, and do they actually take sort of notice of that? But I've had some brilliant conversations with farmers and people who are moving agricultural machinery recently, where we've explained it, we've gone into it, and they get it, because like I said at the start, they are really, really determined to try and help make roads safer. And when you have that conversation, say, do you understand why? And it is there. It is there. However, and I know that Richard and I have spoken about this in the past when we've been planning the meetings up to this, where we've talked about like mud on the road, for instance. And certainly as a team, we're trying to get the wider public to understand some of the pressures that the farming community, and rural communities are under in terms of like getting crops in when there's a short weather window and so on, and how that might result in mud being on the road. And I think Richard and I had quite a sort of discussion about, I'm on one hand trying to make the public understand that there may be that hazard around the corner on a country road of a big vehicle or mud on the road. And quite rightly, Richard challenged me back and said, well, hang on a minute, but we're giving tickets out for that. And yeah, we absolutely are, because the law's quite definitive on that. You have to be keeping that carriageway clear. And we know that loads of people have been doing some amazing work trying to do that and keep on top of it, whilst also trying to get food in. So it's a real balance in it where I'm trying to get people to understand there's going to be a risk, but ultimately that doesn't remove the responsibilities to the people causing the risk, if that makes sense. So it's trying to get that understanding, hopefully trying to reduce people driving at the wrong speeds, understanding there will be hazards. So that's really the road policing side of stuff. I'm no expert when it comes to road police. I don't know whether I'm an expert when it comes to rural policing yet, because we've only been going 13 months. And I tell you what, it's been an absolute roller coaster of a ride, of which we are learning so much from everyone within the rural community, farming communities. One thing can be for sure, if we do get something wrong, and I'm at the other side of the county, by the time I got back to the police station 45 minutes later, everyone knows, because you're all very good at sharing if we've got something wrong. And we're learning very, very quickly about how to try and stop that from happening, really, by trying to make sure we're delivering the best service. Okay, so on the traffic side, I've kind of said to the staff of the NFU, if there are any specific questions about vehicles which I can't answer when we get to the question bit shortly, then I'm happy for them to be collated, to take that away, ask people that have worked in that sort of real strong area of policing, and try and get you those answers if there's something that's really quite technical. But I'm happy to talk about the other traffic stuff when we get to the question bit. So the second bit really is about the rural crime side of stuff, which we have seen an increase in reporting, but we think, or we'd like to think, that actually relates to confidence in rural policing. And that was one of our main goals, to make you aware that we are there, we do care, we do want to know about the things that are happening. But what that actually means is for instance, let's take hare coursing, which is a completely different world to what we were just talking about with road safety. But in Cheshire, we didn't really, as a force, think that we had a hare coursing problem until we asked people to report it. And now, yes, we certainly do. And we certainly have people going onto people's land, and the threats that come with that, and the intimidation. And we feel that it's nice that people are now feeling they're confident enough to report it and that we're taking it seriously. So that is a really positive thing to see, that sadly, crime statistics or incidents are going up. But there we go. So what is it we're currently experiencing in Cheshire? And we kind of try and head things off at the pass. Now, obviously, we had the dome issues, and some of you will be aware of the domes that were on the tractors and being taken. And we did quite a bit of work, again, with the NFU, a lot of partnership work there to try and get that messages about, if you're not using it, get it secured, get it hidden away, locked away, and so on. And talking about layers as well. And when we talk about the security of that, your farm equipment, your trailers, and so on, it is always about layers, because whether it's your Land Rover Defender, a horse box trailer, or anything like that, it's about making sure you've got enough layers on it that's going to frustrate and stop people from being taking the things that you've worked really hard to get, or you need to get the harvest in from. And so when we've talked about, like, and I'll come back to like an agricultural, like quads and Land Rovers and stuff like that, by putting wheel locks on, or locks on gear sticks, or pedal locks, or any of the different things we can do, and we've seen some amazing inventions where people have cradled quads up to the roof of their barns, or they've strapped them down with all sorts of chains and so on. But it really is that it's about these, when we get people coming into your into your farms or into your premises and stuff like that, and they may well be asking if you have anything for anything else that you might want to get rid of or something like that, or sell stuff. It's probably wise to understand that might well be someone doing reconnaissance on your premises, I'm afraid. But if you are getting that kind of calls on it, just be mindful. We're doing the cold caller thing now to try and prevent people from driving down your farm tracks, coming down to have that opportunity to have a look around. Keeping things out of sight, keeping things secure. But again, this goes back to this whole time thing as well, because we appreciate you need to be getting onto one machine. You might be then flipping for another trailer to go out and get the other thing and so on. But what's more frustrating is when you lose something. And certainly, when we've noticed that we're starting to get patterns now, we're trying a much more style, and I don't know whether I can use the terminology aggressive policing, but I will do, in the sense of how we respond to that. We've had historically, we had a team that came onto us that liked to remove quad bikes. I don't know whether many of you are aware, but we were tracking them, or certainly getting an idea that they were heading northeast towards Rotherham and those kind of places there. There is certainly a large group of agricultural quads and so on being used by a group of young men going around like Leeds city centre and all sorts. You can, bizarrely, they have a TikTok account and various other bits and bobs, so you can actually see, and we do, it's on there. But we're now saying, as soon as we start to get those patterns emerging, it's actually, right, what can we do about it? So when we had the first one taken in Knutsford, which was a couple of months back now, instantly off the back of that, we hedged our bets and we went straight to the home addresses of the people who we thought might be involved, because we wanted them to see Cheshire Police outside their houses, even though we're 2-3 counties away or whatever. And we wanted to be knocking on the doors, and we wanted to be getting the registrations of the cars they're using and so on. And that had a really good effect, actually, because actually, although we can't link them directly to it, we had no more quads go. That stopped straight away. And we did get complaints in. So I got complaints. Oh, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt, but can we sort of stick to the road safety side of things, please?
Yes, sorry.
You're doing a brilliant job, don't get me wrong, but
no, that's fine. It was just purely because I was asked about the road safety and rural crime. That's the one thing. That's no problem.
Okay.
So, but I'll just get back, just very quickly finish that anecdote. We're determined as a team to go to the doorstep of these people that are causing problems to try and remove it. Okay. So really speaking, like coming back to the road safety, very much it is simple things to be done. If you're going to be stopped by the police and you're talking about, and we're saying to you about the load you're carrying or your vehicle, if you're doing those checks, those circular checks we've been going and advised to do by our colleagues from DVSA and also by health and safety executives, it's going to be unlikely that there's going to be anything there for us to be looking at. What I will say to you is we are going to be doing more road stops on agricultural machinery. We just are, because from the crime side, we want to check that it belongs to you, it's yours, it hasn't been taken, and so on, but also because of this road safety side of stuff. And that's really the crux of it, that there's going to be hopefully more officers in the rural communities, because that's what I'm pushing for, special constables and everyone, so these checks are going to go on. And that really is what I've got to say about those things. So thank you, Rich.